Thanks very much, Emer, and good morning, everybody. If it's any consolation to the person who has to remove their bike, at least you cycled to work today. And I believe it is cycle to work day, so, well done. Pity about the locking habits, but anyway. So thank you very much to Laura and the team in the EPA for inviting me to this extremely important conference and to give me the opportunity to address you on the topic of climate adaptation. It's actually the first time since I started the job that I've had the opportunity to talk about this incredibly important aspect of the work that we're doing in the department, which is very much, another leg to the stool of what we are doing in the climate space. A lot of my time I spent speaking about the really important work we're doing in mitigation. But adaptation is incredibly important. It's a very, very pressing, and it's something that we do need to deal with in a very urgent fashion, because it's how climate will impact most upon our fellow citizens and our own lives. It's extremely timely as well to have this conference, because we're about to bring the next National Adaptation Framework to government. So without breaking any secrets of government memos and cabinet discussions, which haven't happened yet, of course, hopefully I'll be able to give you just a hint of what's in that adaptation framework. It's also extremely timely because, as Laura said, we are facing an increasing number of very, very stern, very real warnings, not just from scientists, but from our planet, that the planet is warming and warming and warming, and we've just had the 3 warmest years in our history, and every month we seem to get a new record. And I don't think we can wish it away from El Nino, and I don't think we can wish it away from, this is a freak, this is reality, it's happening, and we have to deal with it. In fact, Europe is warming twice as fast as the global average, and we're becoming the fastest warming continent on Earth, which I suppose in a weird way is a little bit of karma, because it's fair to say that by virtue of the development we've done over the last 150 years, a large part of this is due to European influence. In nature terms, what's causing us to be the fastest warming continent on Earth is due to several factors, including the proportion of European land in the Arctic. That's the fastest warming region on Earth, and to changes in atmospheric circulation that favour more frequent summer heat waves. An increase in extreme rainfall is leading to catastrophic events, such as the widespread flooding seen in Italy, Greece, Slovenia, Norway and Sweden in 2023, as well as right here in Ireland. And meanwhile, Southern Europe is seeing widespread droughts, and the frequency of those and severity of those events is increasing all the while. And we know that this is human-induced climate change. It will cause more frequent, more intense extreme events. It has caused widespread adverse impacts and related losses and damages to nature and people. And the rise in weather and climate extremes has led to some irreversible impacts as natural and human systems are pushed beyond their ability to adapt naturally. So I should say that I'm going to have to let my new office know that they're going to have to increase the font to 14, because as you see me peering at it, I thought I'm going to have to just remember my glasses. But anyway, there you go. My department rightly is focused on the need for mitigation and reduction of greenhouse gases, and you know that there have been a number of very important announcements in the last few weeks around things like driving towards offshore wind, as I said at the time, turning our face to the sea. So very important developments in that space. But we have probably been less vocal about the need to take actions to adapt to the locked-in effects of this increased level of carbon in the atmosphere. And despite meeting reduction targets for future carbon emissions, there will still be a locked-in effect and impacts from historic emissions of greenhouse gases. The world will face substantial risks from these climate changes due to these locked-in past emissions, and Ireland obviously is no exception to that. Now, we have taken the issue of climate change very seriously, and we've put in place an effective legislative framework to address the crisis through the Climate and Low Carbon Development Acts of 2015 to 2021, which, because it's a bit of a mouthful, we just call the Climate Act. The Climate Act contains provisions to ensure that Ireland plays its part in meeting climate targets and adapts to the locked-in impacts of climate change. And key provisions of the Act in the context of adaptation include the requirements for the National Adaptation Framework, sectoral adaptation plans, local authority climate action plans, and annual national climate action plans. It's one of the most ambitious climate laws in the world, and it does provide a legally binding framework to lay the foundations for our transition to net zero. And it commits Ireland to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 51% and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. In addition, to keep us on track, the Independent Climate Change Advisory Council, established under the Climate Act, provides evidence-based advice and recommendations on policy to support Ireland's just transition to a biodiversity-rich, environmentally sustainable, climate-neutral and resilient society. And you know that the CCAC produces annual reports and assessments of where we're at. They've just produced their first one this year on electricity adaptation, and it's worth reading, I think. If it's not a long read, and it's worth going into the detail, and there'll be a number of those coming out over the coming months. What will be the impacts on Ireland? Well, look, climate impacts, I think we all know this, they're predominantly those associated with changes in weather extremes, including storms leading to droughts and floods, pluvial, fluvial and coastal, with resultant risks to human health, economic development, property, infrastructure, ecosystems, and as Laura mentioned in her speech, through them, things like insurance and finance costs. In addition, we may well face the arrival of invasive species more suited to climate change climate conditions. Now, we've often faced risks from invasive species, but because these are driven by climate change, they may be more destructive, they may affect more vitally our important parts of our economy, particularly around farming, fisheries, tourism indeed. And we need to prepare for those impacts and work under the Climate Act to plan for future impacts to ensure that Ireland remains climate resilient. And we must do so within the context of ongoing and expected societal change. So the cornerstone of Ireland's climate adaptation policy to date has been the first adaptation framework, the NAF. The 2018 NAF outlined a whole of government and society approach to climate adaptation in Ireland. And in line with international best practice, it relies on mainstreaming adaptation actions into appropriate sectors. And obviously, since then, there have been key sectoral adaptation plans approved by government, and obviously many people will be very familiar with this, 31 local authority climate adaptation strategies published in 2019. 6 government departments, including my own, are currently leading the implementation of the SAPs, and they include those related to food production, critical infrastructure, water, flood risk and health. So I suppose in 2018, what you'd have expected to be the obvious sectors. That NAF went under a statutory review in 2022, and Minister Eamon Ryan, my minister, approved the development of a new NAF following that, which was done throughout 2023. And I know that a lot of people present here will have made submissions into that consultation, including from the local authority sector and the Climate Change Advisory Council. We also had a public consultation over the last couple of months, and the draft is now ready, and I've read it. It's actually a very thorough and good document, and we'll be going to government in the next couple of weeks. In fact, we have what you might almost call Climate Month coming up, because we have a Climate Action Plan going to government and a very important document called the NECP, which is our commitments to Europe in the context of climate, will all be going to Cabinet over the course of the coming weeks. So the draft takes account of developments at international EU levels and adaptation developments since 2018, not least the better knowledge we now have. And work progressed under the local infrastructure, such as our transport networks, energy systems and buildings. By integrating adaptation into all areas of climate action, CAP24 also seeks to ensure, hang on, I think I've skipped a page, beg your pardon, there we go, yes, sorry, again, sorry, I need to bring glasses the next time. So it's been integrated into the local authority adaptation strategies and so forth. And some concepts, including a new concept called just resilience, whereby it is ensured that adaptation efforts leave no one behind, have been included. We've also provided for the need for increased uptake of nature-based solutions for the first time, and we have widened it to include certain sectors, and I'll come back to that. Now, the next steps post that are, once hopefully government approves the new NAF, a new cycle of sectoral adaptation plans will then be developed, and existing sectors will be joined by an additional sector, that of tourism, because we realise, I suppose, at this point that as well as exacerbating the potential climate impacts on our tourism infrastructure, Ireland could potentially see an influx of climate tourist refugees, effectively people who find the rest of Europe too hot during the summer. So we're going to need to adapt to that new economic and social reality. In addition, there will be a scoping exercise on the potential for a new sectoral adaptation plan to cover aspects of the built environment and planning, and that will be undertaken by the Department of Housing. And so these additional steps will help to address gaps in Ireland's existing adaptation planning. So the Climate Action Plan also places a strong emphasis on adaptation, recognising that even as we work to mitigate climate change, we must prepare for its inevitable impacts. And the plan outlines a range of measures to build resilience and reduce vulnerability across all sectors of society. And these include actions to improve the climate resilience of our infrastructure, such as our transport network, energy systems and buildings, which are already, of course, part of the climate adaptation plans, measures to support the adaptation of our agriculture and land use sectors, and initiatives to protect and enhance our natural environment and biodiversity. And by integrating adaptation into all areas of climate action, CAP24 also seeks to ensure that Ireland not only is reducing its greenhouse gases, but also becoming more resilient and better prepared for the challenges that lie ahead. Now, as always, we tend to look to colleagues and allies in this race, and obviously local authorities play a key local role in adapting to climate change. They have taken their expanded mandate to reduce greenhouse gases, and they've now all come through the statutory requirement to prepare local authority climate action plans, which is a great achievement, and I want to congratulate everybody here. They've all been adopted by the elected members. So there are almost 4,000 practical climate actions set out across all the plans to be completed by local authorities over the next 5 years. And it's intended that these plans will assist local authorities to address in an integrated way the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions and climate change adaptation. We also now have better data than we did in 2018. The quality and amount of data available from adaptation planning has significantly improved, and at a national level, the Translate project led by Met Éireann in partnership with the third level sector has produced the first standardised national climate projections for Ireland. The projection is the most up-to-date and highest quality available to the Irish community. It will facilitate the incorporation of the latest climate science into practical, real-world solutions for climate adaptation and planning decisions across Ireland, and ensure, at the very least, we're all working off the same information. In June in 2022, the government agreed to establish a national framework for climate services to coordinate, facilitate and strengthen the collaboration among climate information providers and users. And that's also coordinated by Met Éireann, and it aims to produce the production of standardised and comparable climate services by the climate community in Ireland, so that we can better interpret and apply the complex climate information that is being compiled to practical adaptation tools and solutions. And we also have an official national adaptation platform, Climate Ireland, which serves as a key resource for adaptation-related information in relation to Ireland. It aims to support climate adaptation planning by providing tailored climate and adaptation information, guidance and tools for risk assessment. And as you'd expect with something so important, it's obviously homed in the Environmental Protection Agency. So it's an important tool for use by people in this room and beyond. And it will help, hopefully, make those key decisions and ground those key decisions in data and evidence. I think one of the most important things as well is that we need to widen the network of people who are key allies in terms of driving the adaptation change that we need. It's largely so far been embedded in a small cohort of officials within national and local government, and many of whom are probably here today. So we need to build networks of practitioners beyond this, and the Climate Ireland Adaptation Network, established by the EPA, is aimed at sharing expertise and creating learning opportunities around adaptation in Ireland, as well as improving the consistency of adaptation implementation. And this network has in excess of 250 members, and it's still growing. So if you aren't part of it, I encourage you to look to that and see, can you sign up for that, and widen your network of colleagues who are there to help you and assist you in terms of solutions. Obviously, we're working within a European framework, and I'm delighted Dr. Fiscal is here today to talk about the work being done on risk assessment, which also allows me to drop at least 2 pages of dialogue from my 17-page speech. So thank you very much, Dr. Fiscal. I leave it over to you. But just to say what the Irish context is, we're work on Ireland's first national climate change risk assessment, led by the EPA, will take account of the findings of the European climate risk assessment, and the process should set out the priority impacts of climate change for Ireland, which will provide a basis for making decisions on whether risks are acceptable to society and communities. And it will then determine how risk can be reduced and how potential opportunities can be realised. And I suppose one of the things that we need to establish is what is our risk appetite here? You know, what do we have to spend money to save, and what, unfortunately, in part of the adaptation will we have to leave behind? So that's a really important part of what we need to do. Unfortunately, we also need to be able to measure our progress, and to that we need indicators. Obviously, the pathway to resilience isn't simple or straightforward, and there are a lot of challenges to overcome. So the work on data is really important. That gives us the firm base to work off. But we also need to define adaptation indicators in line with EU and international experience, because without those we can't measure our progress. And a pilot project is nearly complete in the Irish transport sector to develop a methodology that could be used by other sectors. And in the next cycle of sectoral adaptation plans, each sector will need to include meaningful indicators for actions proposed. All sectors also face the issue of maladaptation, which was a new word to me, but I'm advised it means that not only do we fail to adapt, but in trying to adapt we make things worse, which doesn't sound like a good outcome for all the money we're going to spend. So it's important to avoid that pitfall. Adaptation sectors collaborate on cross-cutting issues. So in other words, in acting in one area, we don't have a negative impact and a negative outcome for another area. This is highlighted in the forthcoming NAF, and some of the important issues identified include health impacts, coastal change, and the urban environment. Equally, we think that sectors and local authorities must work more closely and in harmony on the actions that they have to deliver, and that is key. This is a whole of government AVUCA problem, and we can't solve it on our own. We certainly can't solve it within DEC, we can't solve it within the EPA, nor can we solve it within the local authority sector alone. It has to be done collectively across a lot of actors, including into the private sector. I'm going to skip over the next 2 pages as well. Sorry, I only got to read the speech this morning. I was like, oh my God, they gave me 17 pages. I'll be there all morning. But anyway, sorry, a little bit of feedback to the team, I think, on copying and pasting needs to go back. But anyway, so one of the things I'm most concerned about, and I think we all need to be concerned about, and not least in this particular year, is the question of democratic legitimacy in what we're doing. So can we bring the people with us as we make these changes and we take these decisions that are going to be quite challenging in this space? That's a must. It has to be. It's a given. And that's why we've introduced this concept of just resilience into the new forthcoming NAF. So government is committed to engaging with citizens to ensure that the public voice is represented in Ireland's climate policies. The National Dialogue on Climate Action, and obviously this conference is part of that, it's the national programme to engage, enable and empower stakeholders and citizens across society to take climate action. Over 12,000 people have already been involved in the annual climate conversations, and we've engaged over 1,000 stakeholders through the 5 national climate stakeholder forum events, 3 national youth assemblies on climate, and active engagement with the populations most impacted by the transition to a carbon neutral future. Irish people are highly engaged on the topic of climate change. 89% say climate change is important to them personally. 78% report that they often or occasionally discuss climate change with family and friends. And equally, the report shows that this is the EPA's Climate Change, the Irish Mind report, the recent one. Equally, the report shows a large majority of people in Ireland, about 81%, are worried about climate change, including 34% who describe themselves are very worried. And that, our own research in the department supports that. So insight from those engagements have been used to create the Climate Action Plan, to inform communications and strategies, and to try and lay the foundations for a future that's fair, equitable, accessible to all, understood by all. And I know that in 2024, the NDCA is radically expanding its programme to support communities and groups across Ireland to scale the work that they are doing. And one new initiative, really being promoted by Minister Ryan, and if you hear about it, I encourage you to get involved, is the Climate Actions Work Initiative. It's a national engagement and communications campaign to support and encourage action on climate and community resilience over the coming year. The new engagement campaign will focus on hearing from and working with local communities, talking directly to people to help combat climate change. It'll focus on local people and local places, encouraging and supporting climate actions that are designed and developed by communities themselves. And over the coming years, we'll work with groups up and down the country to amplify the huge amount of climate actions already taking place, to provide support to groups where needed, and to encourage more people to get involved in taking climate actions together. I think one of the key things here is that we need to allay people's concerns and that huge level of anxiety, and show people that they could, by taking small steps, dealing with it in their communities, managing those conversations, we can work together to address this, because one of the key things that we all have to take as leaders in this world is we need to convince people that climate action can be dealt with. We don't have to be fatalist in the space of it. We will be able to adapt and we will be able to mitigate, but it's really important that we keep those messages flowing. So look, we have a huge challenge ahead of us. I'm very familiar with that, but I know that working together, the people in this room, the people online, can adapt to the change that is coming. We just need to work together very hard to achieve that. But I look forward to the conversations here today. I'm delighted to say I'm able to stick around for most of the morning, which is quite unusual. And thank you very much to Laura and the team in the EPA for inviting me along to talk to you today. Thank you.